Anyone who's been around, you know how painful these moments can be. We have more risks today in Bitcoins than we've ever had. It's not guaranteed to just go up. Let's bust a few myths, okay? Myth number one. We had a big deleveraging event. That's it, no more risk. Everything's going up now. Let's bust another myth, okay? And this is a big one, the 4-year cycle. This happened 3 times. Surely it's gonna happen again, right? This is complete crap. They don't look the same. They don't act the same. Myth number 3. Markets only top when you have a blow-off top with a massive euphoria. That is simply not true. The acceleration phase does not have to come. This is a very important observation because this is actionable, and I will tell you how. This will ensure that you survive.
Archie.
Professor Few, it's a great pleasure to finally have you. Well, first of all, I finally got a podcast to invite you on, and we've certainly got the occasion to have a good chat and use your skills to let us know what's happening. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, brother. Thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you, everything you've been doing for the space. I've watched you grow over the years, and it's been amazing. Your podcasts are amazing, high quality, very interesting. So I have to congratulate you. And like you say, it's a great opportunity to try to shed some light a little bit, as we had enormous carnage in the market, biggest liquidation event, in particular in the shitcoin space. And anyone who's been around, for any length of time, really, you know how painful these moments can be. Many people get wiped out. Some people get desperate. Some take it very far. And so it's the time to step up for all of us who are still here, who have experience, and share that experience, shed some light, give some hope. Not necessarily for price. That's not the point. Just give some hope that, first of all, anything is possible. Don't do anything stupid. I know many have been liquidated, but if you stick around and if you keep at it, you can't have, the heights of your story without the lows. So the lows are painful, but necessary. So that's basically the main message. We're going to talk about technicals. We can talk about where Bitcoin's going. We can talk about big picture, but none of it matters if you're not around to be part of the story. So, if you need time off, take time off, but never, ever give up. That's the message.
Yeah. Great words of advice in these moments. And I want to give people a little bit of a background as to how we sort of came together. I mean, I've only been in this space since 2021. January 2nd, 2021 is when I started posting as Bitcoin Archive. And it was probably a year later that I saw your account. You were posting, just doing what you were doing, a relatively small account, probably 5,000-6,000 followers. And I just really enjoyed this small account doing what they're doing, trying to help people, because the crux of your entire account is giving people some kind of light with which to navigate, the path of Bitcoin, and we always advocate for people to hodl, but some people are traders as well, or some people need to manage their risk with respect to what's happening in the marketplace. And I found what you were doing was really valuable, and I wanted more people to have exposure to the work that you do that might help them mitigate their risk up and down the cycles. So that's for the audience listening and watching this, that's how I came across Professor Few. And if you want to follow him, his Twitter handle is FewCThis. And so please do give him a follow. He's very much worth a follow. And so that's how we came together. But also, I really don't know too much about you other than what you've been posting on the timeline. So tell us a little bit about you. What's your background? How did you get into Bitcoin? And tell us about the work that you do on the timeline. Why do you post on the timeline? Looking for a secure, trusted way to buy, sell, and hold Bitcoin? Gemini has been leading the way since 2014. Founded by the Winklevoss twins to be a security-first, fully regulated Bitcoin platform. With Gemini, your Bitcoin is protected with enterprise-grade security, backed by insurance and Type 2 certifications for SOC 1 and SOC 2. Whether you're new to Bitcoin or a long-time hodler, Gemini gives you the tools to stack sats and build generational wealth your way. From simple one-tap buys to advanced charts and trading features, it's all here. Buy, sell, and hold securely. That's Gemini. Gemini. Bitcoin with confidence. Need cash without selling your Bitcoin? With DeBiFi, you borrow against your Bitcoin, non-custodial, multi-sig escrow, and you keep your keys. No banks, no selling. Just institutional grade liquidity with terms up to 2 years and APRs as low as 9%. All transactions are signed using private keys on your own device. Using a 3 of 4 multi-sig setup, 3 out of 4 keys must approve every transaction, giving you control, transparency, and peace of mind. Whether you're a hodler, miner, small business, or treasury team, DeBiFi gives you the cash you need now without giving up your Bitcoin upside or triggering a taxable event. Get liquidity, keep exposure, and stay secure. That's DeBiFi. DeBiFi, your Bitcoin, your money.
These are all really great questions. And first of all, I have to say, you started in January 2021. It's unbelievable, man. You have grown tremendously. You're one of the biggest accounts in the space now, and not just big account, but high quality with podcasts. And it's just great to see, man. I really love to see that. And I've been doing this since 2016, you know. And like a lot of people, I was drawn to Bitcoin from an ideological point of view, you know. Basically, we want to fix the world. In a way, you know, you can say it in a few words. We want to fix the world. A lot of the evil in the world comes down to just that, you know, money. What is money? All of society is founded of money, right? But how can we fix the world? How can we improve the lives of millions? How can we diminish the suffering? If people get wrecked, it doesn't work, right? And so the reality of markets is that markets are brutal. And yeah, the HODL meme is a great meme. And it's been a great meme with Bitcoin, but the future is not written. We don't know that Bitcoin will keep going up and up and up. We may have prolonged periods of time with Bitcoin is either ranging, I'm talking about years, or even going down, right? And even up till now, we had great volatility with 80% pullbacks or more back in the days, with countless people getting wrecked, right? And then they get wrecked and they leave. They're no longer around to be part of the story. So what I wanted to see is I wanted to see more people win with Bitcoin, or at the very least, more people knowing that it's possible to win. And for that, I've had trading groups over the years. I've had years of record, hundreds of hours, perhaps thousands of hours of video recording I've done since 2016. So it's been a long journey, and it's been very exciting because you know, what happens always, right? We had a top recently. Now, people are very scared of the word top, right? But we had a top, like prices are down, yes or no? So it's a top. We don't have to say it's a cycle top and all that. This is just confusing, but we had a top, right? And who was there calling for caution, but in an actionable way? Very, very few people. You had basically everyone on social media at the worst time possible, being mega bullish and leading the masses to the slaughterhouse. Now, Bitcoin didn't really go down much, right? This was mainly in the shitcoin land. But it's the slaughterhouse regardless. And that's not a good thing to see. Now, I posted before I disappeared a few weeks ago, at the end of August, I posted a few posts on my Twitter, and I said basically, if you own sold, get out. If you want to long Bitcoin, don't do it until such and such criteria is met. And then I just logged off. I was like, September's going to be very noisy, and October is going to bring a massive nuke. I was basically sure of it. And I was not sure of it because of some sort of magic, right? Or some sort of special predictive power. No, it's just all the ingredients were there. And you know what? Then again, No one was there calling the top or helping anyone. Everyone was rushing to shitcoins. Of course, you have a few perma-bears account who are always spreading, saying a black swan is coming, a black swan is coming. They miss the entire upside, and now they're right. Okay, but put those few accounts aside. There was no one there, right? So that's why I'm here. I'm here so that at crucial junction in the market, at a crucial juncture, you can be safe and you can survive to see another day. And if we collectively raise the IQ levels, in Bitcoin, then more people can win. And sure, I mean, markets, some people say that they are in such a way that the majority is always going to lose. But it's not exactly accurate. So that's why I'm here. No need to speak more about that. I'm here because of originally ideological reasons, like a lot of people into Bitcoin, and wanting to see more people win with Bitcoin. And understand, by the way, we have more risks today in Bitcoins than we've ever had in the history of Bitcoin. So we can talk about that later. So it's more and more important to be, for all the people who are in Bitcoin and put their life savings, right? It's important to understand that there are risks. It's not guaranteed to just go up and up and up. It doesn't work like that.
What's your professional background?
One thing that's really important for me is to remain anonymous, right? We saw the rise of, crypto crimes, and people see you. Sometimes they can infer like the size with which you're trading, by looking at your social media posts and things like that. And so people have some ideas that you're insanely wealthy, right? And then you become at risk, your family become at risk. So I don't need to talk too much about myself. Also, don't think it's that useful. I think I'm here because of Bitcoin. I want to see more people win with Bitcoin. Now, my professional background, if you like, put it this way. I'm a risk taker. So whether in business or in other aspects of life, I'm a risk taker.
I gotcha. Say no more. I understand. That's fine. So one of the reasons I really wanted to have this discussion with you is to, we've just had, I wouldn't call it a market crash, but a lot of people are acting as though it was a market crash, probably because of the highlight figure of liquidations being a record 19 billion across the ecosystem. How do you see what's just transpired now? What are your thoughts on that? And where would you like to start that story?
Well, I will start this story with a simple word. One word that's going to save more people than any other word, perhaps in the English language. And the word is shitcoins. Now, collectively, we came up with that word, the word shitcoin, in this space, because they are shitcoins. And yes, this includes Ethereum, this includes Solana, this includes all the big names, this includes your favorite little token. They are all shitcoins. Outside of Bitcoin, they are all shitcoins. Now, why is this important? You see, I always taught people the words you use are super important, because then if you're going to be playing with shitcoins, maybe you want to be trading, you think you can do something in the markets, and that's fine. There's no problem. There are no problems with that. Just make sure you call them shitcoins, because if you call them shitcoins, you know that you got to be careful. There is no level above zero that is value for these shitcoins. Now, of course, there may be exceptions, and some things may happen at some point that's going to be the exception and the one that lasts and all that. Sure, maybe. Just keep calling them shitcoins. Do yourself a favor. Call them all shitcoins, and you will be safe. You know that you have to have risk management. You cannot just, you see, the hodl meme is for Bitcoin. It is not for shitcoins. So this is basically what is the most important thing to remember from a point of view of what's actionable. You see, I'm not an analyst. Analysts are losers. I can be an analyst if you want. I can use fancy words, describe everything that's happened, and look at this exchange and USD DPEG and go on for an hour with you and explain to you and make you feel like you really understand what happens. And what will end up at the end of the 1 hour? What will you take from that? You will take nothing. You will just feel like you understand. You will feel more certainty. You'll feel like you know what's going to happen now because X, Y, Z reasons. So this is the wrong path. You see, this is the path of analysts. But if you think about it, why are people analysts? They're not analysts because they made hundreds of millions of dollars in the market, okay? They're not analysts because of that. They're analysts because they're losers. So, and no offense to lots of wonderful people who are analysts, but from the point of view of playing the markets, analysts are losers. So what we really are, right, we are risk takers. Why is this important? Because you need to understand that even if you hodl Bitcoin, you take on a certain amount of risk. There would be no reward possible if there was no risk in it. That is also just the nature of the markets. It's not possible for there to be a reward if there is no risk, right? Because if there's no risk, that means everything is perfect. Well, that's the pico top, okay? It doesn't work like that. The only way there can be a reward is there are risks. So we're risk takers. So from the point of view of risk taking, what's happened? We had a big deleveraging event. That's a fact. And it was a big deleveraging event, not so much in Bitcoin, which perhaps didn't carry that much leverage, but mainly in shitcoins. Why did it happen? We're going to leave that to analysts because that's not useful. What's useful is what's going to happen next. In other words, what's the smartest way to position now? Now, let's bust a few myths, okay? Myth number one. Oh, we had a big deleveraging event. That's it. No more risk. Everything's going up now. Okay, you just need 5 minutes. I can take my 7-year-old child and show them in 5 minutes that you can have big deleveraging event followed by mega downtrends. And you can have big deleveraging events followed by mega uptrends. And if you run the math, not complicated, just simple math across the assets in the crypto space, you will see that it's basically 50-50. So a big deleveraging event does not mean assets are going up from here, and it doesn't mean assets are going down either. Okay? So that's a very important myth to understand. If I can share my chart here, let's take a look. Yeah, we have a chart here, right? This is the weekly chart, right? Look, from the naked eye, right? No need to overcomplicate. Big deleveraging event, that was in Bitcoin back then, right? In 2021. Bitcoin went down 50%, not like today. It was just, that was a big deleveraging event. What happened then? Okay, well, we had a big range. A big range happened. Eventually, market went back up in an echo bubble that marked a pico top, right? So this was one deleveraging event. We had another big deleveraging event right here at the pico top. This was mega big deleveraging event. If you look at the volume, there was a lot of volume in those times. Of course, the most volume here. But there was a lot of volume in there as well. There was a lot of volume in here, right? But then what happened? Big deleveraging event, range for a few weeks, going further down, range for a few months, more down, Luna collapse and so on and so forth, right? Bear market. So you can have deleveraging events in a bull market. You can have deleveraging events in a bear market. Eventually, one big deleveraging event marked the lows. Okay, sure, but you can also have that at the top. So just looking at that alone is not too actionable. And even though we had a deleveraging event here in shitcoins, right, nothing's really changed from the point of view of Bitcoin, okay? So we're going to have to look at other data points and other metrics to try to figure out, well, is this a pico top? Is this just more ranging? And in the balance of the equation, what is the smartest way to position? That means not trying to predict the future, you know, that's for losers again, because who can predict the future? No one can. Or if they could, they'd be mega trillionaires, right? But no one is like that. You cannot predict the future. So then what can you do? You can know the past and you can know the present. And in the present, you're given a set of probabilities that if you can gauge them accurately, you can determine what's the smartest way to position so that over time, as I make decisions over and over and over, I position the smartest way possible and then stack the odds in my favor so that over any length of time, I come out a winner. And that's very important because take a look at this chart, right? It's the Bitcoin chart. Of course, this is a chart that goes up only, right? If you look on a high enough time frame, it goes up only. But not only is not guaranteed to continue, but in that up only, you have mega drawdown, even intra-cycle drawdowns, mega, 80% plus. This alone was 50%, okay? So my answer to your question, what's happened and what's the best way to look at it, is this. Ask yourself, what's the smartest way to position while making sure that you're defining where you're wrong on that positioning. Even if you hodl, right? Let's say you hodl Bitcoin and you don't care about some fluctuations. Determine where you're wrong on that hodl idea. Or else, what if Bitcoin does this tomorrow? It's possible. Don't say it's impossible. What if it does this? Well, if you hodl, you're going to sell the bottom. Okay? So you need to have an idea of where your current thesis is wrong.
So I guess that begs the question, where are we right now? Because, when I have a look at that weekly chart, if you just expand all the way to like the 2013, this just looks like an expanded sort of 2013 to 2016 section. It doesn't look like we've had what we would typically expect to happen in a bull market, which is at least some kind of steepening of the curve. It's just been a very consistent 3-year uptrend that kind of looks like what happened. Is it not 2013? It's from about 14 to 16, 17, before the blow-off top. The blow-off top was late 16, wasn't it?
Yeah, right up here in 2017.
Or late 17, sorry. Yeah. So, before that blow-off top started in that cycle, it just looks like something similar to that, a little bit more prolonged. And so it's really hard for a lot of people to have some kind of conviction about where we are, because on one hand, the bull market's been running since, the bottom of the bear market at 15,500. Bitcoin's put on more than 100,000 since then, and it's given up a little bit. But by the same token, we've got these macro factors starting to play to our favor. Interest rates potentially coming down further. We've got the business cycle turning up with that potentially, liquidity increasing as well. All of these things that people talk about. But ultimately, when we look at this chart, because that's all that matters at the end of the day, when we look at this chart, where are we in the business cycle, in the Bitcoin cycle?
You make very good observations in terms of the steepening of the curve and all that. So let's address. We busted one myth, okay? The myth that a big deleveraging event means it's the bottom, okay? Now, I just pointed out a couple of examples, but you can look at the whole chart and see that you're going to have big deleveraging events in a bull market and you're going to have them in the bear market, and it means nothing, okay, for price action. So that's one myth. Now let's bust another myth, okay? And this is a big one. Perhaps the biggest one, is the favorite in the space, is the myth of the 4-year cycle or the halving cycle. However way you want to call it, right? So this is the biggest meme of all and the biggest myth. Now, why? Sure, I probably have this on the chart, right? Because we have this 4-year cycle. Let's take a look at this, right? Take a look at this. All right. This is the 4-year cycle on the chart, right? There's a little bit of alpha in there for those who can pause the video and take a good close look at the chart. The 4-year cycle, right? Where is that coming from? Or the halving cycle, you can, but what is this? The 4-year cycle is like, oh, look, we got 3 green years and then 1 red year. And another 3 green years, and then a red one. 3 green, red. Whoa, this happened 3 times. Surely, it's going to happen again, right? Okay? This is complete crap. Okay? There is no 4-year cycle. There are no cycles. Okay? Now, what do I mean by that? What do I mean by it is this. First of all, let us work by hypothesis, right? Let's work by elimination. Let's assume there was a 4-year cycle. Okay? Okay. Let's assume there's a 4-year cycle. How does that help us? And does that help us? Well, let's take a look. You were there in January 2021, right? And you remember everyone calling for the 4-year cycles and so on and so forth, right? Nobody called that 50% pullback, which got everybody wrecked, right? And why they didn't? Because take a look. First cycle, you had, let's say it starts from here, right? Big bear market, big move up, one pump. Mega pullback. By the way, this was 80%, right? This looks small on the chart, but 80%. And then another big pump, double pump, okay? And then you call this one cycle. I don't know, how is that actionable, right? You have 80% pullback in here, right? Another pump. Mega big bear market, bottoming structure, and then a single easy parabolic advance. This was basically the golden run of Bitcoin. It just went up and up and up. Sure, you had low time frame volatility, but it was a parabolic, unbroken advance. No double pump. A completely different type of cycle, if you want to use the word cycle. Like completely different. And so many people saw this double top. And in here, they were calling for another one, right? And you know what? They got wrecked. And they lost it all at the pico bottom. Why? This cycle, yet again, was completely different. You had a prolonged period of diminishing volatility, big puke into a low, but this low did not give rise to a nice parabolic advance like this, right? No. What you had instead is a big years-long trading range. It was brutal. If you didn't lose it all here, you lost it all here, believe me. And we can look at the data and the statistics. The amount of people in the BitMEX days, right? The amount of people who lost it all here, or in the, Black Swan event of March 2020, either that or in the infinite, endless chop that lasted years. How does this resemble this? It doesn't, or that. It doesn't resemble it at all. No cycle whatsoever. And then what happened? We had the Black Swan event, and then V-shaped recovery, and then a very sharp and very strong parabolic advance, but very short, okay? And then people were expecting now another big move like 2017, which would have put Bitcoin, in 200K or so back then. And you know what? It didn't happen. It stopped at 69 or 65 at the time, did a 50% pullback, and then an echo bubble, slight higher high, 69K, and then a severe bear market. How does this cycle resemble any of the other ones? It doesn't. And same this time around. Now, what we had this time, and this is pointing to what you were talking about, okay? So now let's address the current situation. There's no cycles, okay? They don't look the same. They don't act the same. They don't have the same dynamics in any way whatsoever. So for the point of view of risk-taking or positioning, it's meaningless to say cycles. That's the first thing to understand.
Let me just push back against that for a second and say, I think it looks to me, if I was to make the case against what you've just said, I'd say it looks like it's an alternating cycle. There's certainly a case for that, in that the double pump of like 2013-14 was expected in 2021, but it was muted because of the shitcoinery and fuckery of FTX and Genesis and, Luna and all Terra, all that sort of stuff that muted what should have happened. What was expected to happen in that second pump. And that probably would have, taken shape in a similar vein to the cycle from 2013-14. And then we've got sort of a prolonged build-up of from 2014 to 2017 with the blow-off top, which I kind of liken to what's happening now, except on a longer time scale. And we probably won't get a blow-off top at all, or if we do, it won't be to such a great extent. So I guess, it's easy to to point to mitigating circumstances and make excuses, but I guess that's the counter narrative to what you've put forward about, none of these cycles look the same, but they kind of do behave in the same way. Not perfectly, but kind of do.
It's very, very interesting what you're saying. I don't think you're contradicting what I'm saying. I think, in fact, you're corroborating, because you're always going to have new elements that come in the market. In this case, you're right, the FTX selling paper Bitcoin and probably stunting the growth of Bitcoin, along with other bad actors, by the way. And this time we have other factors and so on and so forth. You're always going to get new factors. And the point is, there are no cycles. When I say there are no cycles, when I say that, I say from the point of view of risk taking. Now, from the point of view of the analysts, there's going to be some very beautiful cycle-like things I can point out to, and I will. And the first thing is what you mentioned, which is, you mentioned, and you're 100% correct, you had almost every cycle, or basically you could say every cycle, you had a linear growth of Bitcoin followed by an explosive parabolic growth. And this happened every time. Slightly different, but it rhymed every time. We can even do this, right? And then you had it even here. Now, this was more messy, like I pointed out, but still, right? Linear followed by parabolic, right? So this is definitely something that rhymes. And you can see here, we only had the linear part, right? It's been very long, but it's been very orderly. But we didn't have the blow-off top. And you're right that this is a very important observation, because this is actionable, and I will tell you how this is actionable, right? Basically, you're like, where is this, right? Where is our blow-off, right? Where is our acceleration phase, okay? So let's answer this. First of all, to all the listeners, put this in your head. The acceleration phase does not have to come, okay? We don't have to have a blow-off top. This is the biggest misconception. So this is the myth number 3 that we're going to bust. Markets only top when you have a blow-off top with a massive euphoria. That is simply not true. You can have many different kinds of market tops, including euphoric tops. But you can have distributive tops, which can take many forms, rounded tops, ranging, all kinds of variations. It does not have to blow off, okay? So anyone who's there holding on to their Bitcoins and saying, well, I'm just going to hold because we didn't have euphoria. Well, first of all, you may be bad at judging euphoria, right? Because the market is a very complex beast. But even if we didn't have euphoria, that does not mean the market didn't top. That is just a wrong argument, all right? But we didn't have euphoria from the point of view of price action and from the point of view of Bitcoin. That doesn't mean it will come, but what it does mean that is useful and actionable for all of your listeners is that logically, right, a child can understand that. If we didn't have this acceleration phase in the Bitcoin price, well, how can we logically expect to have another 75% bear market, right? All of those bear markets came after we had a big blow-off top. So just logically, right, you don't need to be a genius or a market wizard to understand that without this, it's illogical to expect this. Now, that's very useful, right? If you think about it. That's very, very useful. No, I've said that in the past, as long as all we have is this linear advance in Bitcoin, from any given top, it's logical to expect that the downside remains limited to 50% rather than the typical 75, 80%. Now that's actionable.
You could almost argue that, those straight lines that you've mapped from the bottom of each bear market, that's kind of the adoption profile growing from cycle to cycle. And the bull and bear markets, the upswing and the drawdowns are kind of distractions from that. And if anything, the bear market's just a reversion to that adoption line that constantly goes up.
100%. Now, that's not guaranteed to continue, right? But what we can only deal with is what's in front of us. So for that, I remain optimistic for Bitcoin, even though we have unprecedented risks that we didn't have before. But I remain optimistic on this adoption and on the possibilities that Bitcoin brings to the world, right? So I remain optimistic, and I say, well, if the downside is limited to 50%, right? As long as, from the point of view of probabilities, right? It's not about predicting the future. It's about making smart decisions along the way. So let's say Bitcoin goes down 25%, right? Then you start thinking like, hey, you know what? The downside is limited to 50%, most likely, right? And, or at least in terms of the data that I have at hand. And the price is already down 25%. Well, you know what? It might be smart, instead of thinking, oh, a big bear market's coming, 80% it's going to go down 80%. You must start thinking, you know what? I'm going to start being more aggressive. I can start having a certain type of exposure, and I can know where I'm wrong on that, right? And if the price comes closer and closer to the point where my thesis is wrong, that gives me more and more opportunity. Do you know what I'm saying? So
sure.
If price goes down and I'm like, it's the point of max opportunity is the closest possible to my invalidation, right? So for someone who's hodling Bitcoin and you're thinking, maybe you've been hodling for months or years, right? So most likely you're up, right? And you don't want to start making poor decisions if the price is down 30, 40%, right? Because you're like, well, maybe that's the point of maximum opportunity. And same, when the price is going up, you need to have key junctures where you can make smart decisions. I'm going to show you something, right? I'm going to show you this chart. Take a look at this chart, right? This is a chart I've had since the bottom of the bear market, and we've been following this along. Me and a big group of students, we followed this along, right? This bull run has been characterized by something very, very simple. Very short and rapid advances, followed by ranges, and then a scary spring, a scary spike lower and then the range eventually resolves to the upside. This is what happens every single time, right? So let's just go quickly. Even from the peak or bottom, you had FTX collapse, and then a very small range with low volatility. And then you had a spring, which was at the time, some more FUD were coming in at the time, the Genesis, something like that, right? And then that spring took out the FTX lows and immediately recovered. Okay, this was the peak or low of that range. And then you had a rapid advance, meaning it just took a few weeks to move up. Like if you didn't catch that, you didn't get any options to, it just went up. Did not let you do anything in those few weeks, right? And then you had another range and lasted a few weeks, and that range had a big spike down. This was the banking collapse at the time, and USDC DPEG on the weekend. I don't know if you recall. And this was a spring that sent to the next range. And it repeated and repeated. Now, this has a bigger range. This was a summer range, right? And then you had a big crash. And then what happened here, Grayscale won their lawsuit, okay, which opened the door to the Bitcoin ETF, okay? We had some news that BlackRock had filed for an ETF right here. BlackRock filed for an ETF, price pumps, but it was not ready. Retest the lows. Grayscale wins their lawsuit right here. Range is a few more weeks, but this range, after there was a spring locally, you don't see it on this chart, on the Kraken chart, but on the derivative charts, it took the lows. Or on the daily close, there was a daily close below. And then the spring sent us into this rapid advance, pricing in the ETF, right? And then we have another range. This was the ETF launch. Okay, it was a little bit of a sell the news.
Just one more thing on that leg up. That was also when Trump really firmed to become the next president as well.
Right here?
Yeah. No, sorry. No. That's the year after, isn't it? Sorry,
I wasn't here. No.
Apologies. Yeah,
here you got just pricing in the ETF, and then we had the ETF launch, and then you had the sell the news, and then you had the little spring, which was basically a spring where everyone was like convinced now that this was a sell the news, you know, after a few weeks of downside.
Yeah.
And at that point, we got the most successful ETF launches in the history of ETFs, right? And so markets started to realize that, crap, you know, this is the real deal. And then we had a big move up again, but that big move up, we had some euphoria in shitcoins and in Bitcoin, new all-time highs, and then a big trading range. So I don't need to go on again. You know, I can remember every single candle in Bitcoin's history since 2016, right? I can explain to you what happened every single candle here. This was Iran war escalation and so on and so forth. Then Trump wins the election. Everybody says that this was priced in when, how can you price in an election when the odds were 50-50 before, right? It's not possible. So it was not priced in, and it went up very high. And then this was the Trump inauguration, right? So we had some sell the news here. Trump inauguration right here, okay? So logical to see another trading range established, but this is where we had a change of behavior from the bottom. Okay, so this is very actionable intel. For the first time in this entire run, we had a major fake out. It was not just a spring. You see this wick right here? Could have been the spring. It wasn't. Instead, we had a major fake out, and this fake out was the tariff scare, right? And equities nuked as well and everything. So if you want, you can call this a fake out and then range reclaim, but it was still a change of behavior. And what we are faced with right now is the very first time this entire run that we failed to expand after a range is established, right? So anyone who's calling for top, they have a case. You cannot dismiss the bear case, right? We definitely have a change of behavior.
It does look like it's tapering. The run is tapering, right?
I mean,
because there was quite a consistent line up until that point.
That's right. But not only that, I can see this to my child. I can show this chart to my child and tell him, like, point to me what's different. You don't need a fancy analyst to tell you that things are different. Now we have lots of, old whale selling. We have lots of FUD of, we have a lot of our own problems in Bitcoin that's unrelated to equities. But if you compare this with what happens with gold and equities, right, you're definitely asking yourself some questions. That's normal. But why am I saying all this? Because just a little bit ago, we talked about how we can make bets when we know we have a certain thesis and we can determine where we're wrong, right? And we said, you know what, more than 50% downside is illogical at this point of view. Does not mean it's impossible, but it's illogical. So then I want to position in the smartest way possible. So if price starts to come down, right, as close as possible to this 50%, I'm going to have to be very active if I have a thesis and start making bets, right? Because I'm a risk taker. If I don't take risks, I also don't get to enjoy the rewards, right? No risk, no story. But you know what? Now I mentioned all this to say we have the same thing to the upside. Once we had a change of behavior, okay, I was saying at the end of August, right before September, in here, I was saying this is not the time to be mega bullish. It's the time to be cautious and see what happens. Now, we had many other signals, right? For example, shitcoin open interest was higher than Bitcoin open interest. Now, this is alpha for all of your listeners. And this is alpha I can share widely because it's never going to decay, you know? It's not something secret. Once you have shitcoin OI, open interest, greater than Bitcoin open interest, you only have a few weeks before you get some kind of major event. It's always like that. It's always been like that, and it always will be like that. And the reason, because it always will be like that, I can share this freely. You know, it's not some kind of secret alpha. It's out in the open. If you'd like, I can explain to you why this is the case. But what I'm trying to explain is that this top, it is a top, local top, or more than that, we don't know yet, but it is a top. This top was entirely easy to call and to position properly. And the few who were positioning properly are the ones you need to be paying attention, not the hindsight people who are going to analyze why we had the crash and what happened on Binance and hyperliquid, auto deleveraging, and so on and so forth. A lot of noise. You can see that this is a simple chart. You could have told your child, something's changed, I have to be cautious. And then you can look and be more granular and look at how much shitcoin was going on. And that is just mechanistically bound to lead to a top.
And so what do we need to see here to give us confirmation one way or the other? Do you have a point, whether it's support or resistance, that you're looking to be broken?
Well, I don't want to share specific levels because that tends to get people wrecked, right? Because then people are just going to follow blindly and start buying on the back of something I'm saying without all the proper context, right? But I would say this: you need to understand that there is a bear case on a high time frame and on low time frames. And it's a bear case for Bitcoin, and there is a bull case. Now, if you don't see the bear case and you're a bull, you are setting yourself up to be trapped. Okay? Sooner or later, you will be trapped. You will lose a lot. It's inevitable. If you're a bear and you just are blind to the bull side, same. You're setting yourself up to fail, right? Because the markets aren't predictable. No market is predictable. That's very, very important to understand. No one can predict the market. You're playing with this mathematical equation, right? And there's a range of possible outcomes. And this range changes. It doesn't stay static, right? So if you don't change and you just are static and stiff, you will get wrecked, okay? It's inevitable. Now, we can talk about some of the risks. You know, we have high concentration of Bitcoin into the ETFs and the treasury companies, MicroStrategy and others. And that's an unprecedented risk that we're facing with Bitcoin, right? A risk of concentration of custody, okay? Now, it's a problem. There's no question about that. It's a problem not right now, but in the future. And a lot of people who've been with Bitcoin for a long, long, long time, they see that and they're selling. Okay, you can see that. A lot of people have been selling their Bitcoins from a long, long time ago. They're saying basically Bitcoin is not being adopted at a corporate level and it's being adopted by the government and so on and so forth. And what's next for Bitcoin? And you have risks, right? You have definite risks. A lot of money and power is being wielded into Bitcoin that wasn't the case before, right? That's a certain risk. And we have other risks of the corporate buying, like MicroStrategy, for example. His average is 74, right? So his average is in here, right? 74,000.
Mm-hmm.
As his average is in here. So it is bound to happen, right? And he holds an enormous amount of Bitcoin. It's bound to happen that the Bitcoin price will meet MicroStrategy's average. Do you understand that?
Sure.
It's inevitable. It's mathematical, okay? Whether that happens at a higher price or whether that happens now, with the price being 74, right? It's here. The price is here. This is MicroStrategy's average, right? Something like that. So whether price comes down to here now or whether we have further upside and then this keeps going up, right? Because he will keep buying. And then we meet the price. That's another question. But what is inevitable is that this price point will be met. And then what do you think? How do you think the market will respond when that happens?
Well, we saw that in the last bull market or in the bear market where, yeah, strategy, as it was known back then, was MicroStrategy. It did trade at below the market value of its Bitcoin.
That's right.
If I recall correctly.
Absolutely.
But there's no margin call attached to any of their debt.
No, there's none. You're right. And I don't think he's at risk of liquidation. That's not my point. But my question is not this.
Sure.
You need to think second order thinking, right? You need to think how other market participants are going to react.
Yeah.
Back in the previous bear market, MicroStrategy was important, but not anywhere near as important as it is today. Because they kept buying and they bought a lot. Okay. And Michael Saylor showed that he's not selling, but he's not alone. Okay. It's a company, it's a public company. Also, what if Michael Saylor has something happen to him? Like, what if he gets into an accident? I don't want that to happen, obviously, but us, risk taker, we have to think of everything. So these are risks that didn't exist before, and they're going to happen. They're going to materialize. Question is whether it materializes now or in the future, but they will materialize. It's inevitable. Okay, so that's something to think about if you're holding Bitcoin. What do you think happened? Tell me, what do you think happens when, not if, but when, Bitcoin trades at or below MicroStrategy's average price, and MicroStrategy holds, how much do they hold right now? Like 10% of the Bitcoin supply? No, 1%?
No,
1%, right? 1 or 2%?
Around 1%, yeah. Well, we saw what happens. I mean, when rumor and innuendo is pushed out through various media channels. For example, in the last cycle in the bear market, we saw the persistent story of MicroStrategy being margin called when it was obvious, documented, refuted numerous times that there is no margin call. And but the story just, when there's fear in the market, it's really easy to push FUD articles fueled by FUD, and there are lots of people on Twitter who are ill-informed idiots harvesting attention. And so that happened. But in this instance, what we now have is we have an expanded ecosystem with much weaker players. And we don't know how they're going to hold up. I'm pretty confident that Michael Saylor's company is going to be just fine. I'm not so confident about numbers 4, 5, 6 all the way until 185 because there are a lot of these Bitcoin corporate treasury companies and corporate holders of Bitcoin as well. I'm not so convinced. And so what I expect to happen is a lot of these listed entities will face pressure through their share price. If you're going to go up because of what happens with Bitcoin, then you're going to go down with what happens with Bitcoin as well. And so I would expect that there'd be heightened attention on those companies and quite a lot of stories planted in the media and short positions taken against them. And so that's going to put a lot of pressure on them. And it remains to be seen how they're going to hold up and if they're capable of maintaining the conviction that Saylor did and whether or not their balance sheets and their financial positions can support that conviction.
Let me ask you a question. So I said 10%, but I think the ETFs, they hold 10% of the supply. Am I correct?
No, not anywhere close to 10%. So the biggest ETF is BlackRock's, which is very close to Saylor's. I think they still hold more.
Okay.
And there are a bunch of others that are much smaller but still significant. So it doesn't come close to 10%. But maybe the overall sort of institutional corporate holding might come close to 10%. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's probably something like that. Yeah. So Michael Saylor is probably near 1%, maybe a little more. BlackRock's probably something similar. And if you take it all together, you probably have concentration of custody, something like 10%. And then you have the exchanges. Obviously, that's a different story. But it's interesting. you see, when we think about that now, let's talk about a little bit. We talked about, first of all, deleveraging events, what they mean, and whether they're bullish or bearish, right? We busted that myth. We talked about the four.
Can I just stop you there? We've got a little bit of background noise.
Yeah, no, you know what? I live in the tropics, and it's the rainy
it's rain,
season
is it?
here, and it's starting to rain. So, and I live by the beach, right? I'm by the beach, and the rains are vicious, which I love it personally. But yeah, it starts getting noisy, and I apologize.
No, that's fine. Now that you've told me, I can immerse myself in the romance of monsoonal rain.
I personally love it,
Yeah.
but yes, it gets loud on the microphone. But let me tell you this, okay? We talked about deleveraging events, very important. We talked about euphoric tops and like the concept that markets cannot top without a euphoria. Okay, that's wrong. We talked about the 4-year cycle. There are no cycles. I love you, but there are no cycles. And we talked about understanding that shitcoins are shitcoins. Very, very, very important basic concepts that will. And we talked about having a line in the sand where you tell yourself, here, I am wrong. It doesn't matter where that line is or why you put it there. It's just important that you have it. This will ensure that you survive. If you survive long enough, right? What's left? What is the only other outcome possible? Is that you are a winner. All you have to do is survive long enough. I want to really hammer this in. Imagine you're in a fight, a boxing fight or a jiu-jitsu fight, right? The greatest fighters are the ones who know how to survive. And if they survive long enough, they win because they cannot lose. So if you cannot lose, meaning be defeated, that means you will win. So this has to be your mindset. There's a saying in the markets, whoever loses best wins. So this is what's most important. And this is what I want to really hammer in. People need to understand that they need to have the courage to take a loss sometimes, wherever that is, wherever it is, and then understand that they need to survive another day to eventually become a winner, and that there is no other way. I don't know if you can still hear me. The rain became really loud here.
It's very loud. Maybe my producer is laughing because he knows how much work he's going to have to do in the post-production. Maybe we just take a break.
You know what? This rain is probably going to last for hours. So let's just wrap it up and we can do another podcast in the future if your listeners want to. But let me just wrap up. Okay?
Sure. Let's finish it up. Yeah.
Let me wrap up. We can talk next podcast. We'll talk about levels, what to buy, where it's wrong, and then when to sell. And what are the indicators to look for, right?
We'll post this as part 1, and so people can expect to have many more discussions between us.
That's right. So let me just wrap up by telling you this. Gaining everything and losing it all, it's equal distance. When you're up big in life, you're one step away from losing it all. But you know what? If you're down big, you're one step away from being great. So your story, you're listening right now, you're in Bitcoin, whether maybe you're interested in shitcoins, but you're here, you're listening, you've already made it. This is maybe the low for the next height in your beautiful story. Never, ever give up. I love you guys. We will talk again very soon.
Thank you, Professor. And it's been a pleasure having you on the pod. Do I hear the rain actually quietening down now? It's almost...
It's going to continue, man. We'll do it part 2.
We'll do part 2 another time. Thank you so much for your thoughts. It's been a pleasure. I love what you do on the timeline. We're going to post how people where people can find you. But if they're listening to this, his Twitter handle is called @FewSeeThis, FEWSEETHIS, and give him a follow. It's definitely worth your time. And keep your eyes and ears peeled for part 2 of this discussion. We're going to go deeper, that's for sure. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you for everything you're doing. Love you, brother.
Love you, brother. Cheers.